Well, welcome everyone to this online service for the Northern Beaches Churches of Christ. This will be our last online service for the time being, as we'll be able to meet and share fully in the on-site services going forward. We'll even be able to dispense with masks and sing out unrestricted. So for those of you who are in the Illawarra, we'd love to see you at our worship services 10 a.m. on Sunday mornings at the Balgownie Community Hall. And if you can't make it on any given Sunday, the podcasts of the message will be available shortly afterwards on the link on our webpage, and you'll see details for that at the end of this production. And for those of you who are further afield, we'd love you to continue following and accessing the messages via this means. Also, feel free to sign up and receive our weekly newsletter and to continue to support our ministry. Now, don't forget our special services leading up to Christmas. Next Sunday morning at 10 a.m, Christmas Eve at 6 p.m, a special family service. We encourage you to invite your family and friends as we celebrate this wonderful occasion of amazing love and peace and joy and hope for our weary world, as the carol says. Well, today we welcome Jeff Bacik, a media personality, a member of our church, and a regular speaker at our services. It's always great to have Jay sharing with us, and we look forward to his message today. Welcome, Jay.
Hello, welcome back. My name's Jeff Bacik, and it's good to talk to you on what I have frequently called our fireside chat. I'm not exactly sure where the fire is, but I'll give you as much fire as God will let me give to you. I'm recording this part of the service in the Northside Community Church at Crow's Nest. Great church, great auditorium, great people, and they have served this community for many years, and they're kind enough to let me come back because I was a pastor here in the good old days. And this is emanating from the Northern Beaches Church of Christ down in Wollongong. And we meet there every Sunday. We'd like you to join us if you're on the coast. And this could be our last video service for a while. This service is being recorded and broadcast out to people, but also will be in the chapel in the community centre this Sunday as well. So it's kind of different. I'll be there as well, and then we'll move into communion. So thank you for joining us, and may God's peace be with you.
Sound asleep and too afraid of what might show up while you're dreaming. Nobody sees you. Nobody will believe you. And every day you try to pick up all the pieces, all the memories, they somehow never leave you. Nobody sees you. Nobody will believe you. God only knows what you've been through. God only knows what they say about you. God only knows how it's killing you. But there's a kind of love that God only knows. God only knows what you've been through. God only knows what they say about you. But God only knows the real you. There's a kind of love that God only knows. You keep a cover over every single secret, so afraid if someone saw them they would leave. But somebody sees you. Somebody will never leave you. God only knows what you've been through. God only knows what they say about you. God only knows how it's killing you. But there's a kind of love that God only knows. God only knows what you've been through. God only knows what they say about you. But God only knows the real you. There's a kind of love that God only knows. one's to blame? What if we could start over? We could start over. We could start over. Oh, for the lonely, for the ashamed, the misunderstood and the ones to blame. What if we could start over? We could start over. We could start over. 'Cause there's a kind of love that God only knows. God only knows what you've been through. God only knows what they say about you. But God only knows the real you. There's a kind of love that God only knows. God only knows what you've been through. God only knows what they say about you. But God only knows the real you. There's a kind of love that God only knows. God only knows where to find you. God only knows how to break through. God only knows the real you. There's a kind of love that God only knows.
I'm going to talk a bit about the Wayside Chapel. I was working at the Wayside Chapel for life education from the year 2000 for about 15 years, except the last bit, the office was somewhere else. But it was a place started by the Reverend Ted Knopf. Some of you older people remember that, around about 1964. And he was a bit of a rebel. I nearly said a ratbag. That would be a very unkind thing, because he wasn't. But his detractors tried to push that on him. He went through a few heresy trials. He was found innocent on all counts. And he had an amazing ability to talk about the needs of people and meeting the needs of whatever came their way at the Wayside Chapel. It was a Methodist church to start with and then became Uniting. Ted himself was just a creative kind of guy. He started life education with Healthy Harold, and that's what I became the leader of for a period of time. But he also was able to open up to the people of the street. And there's a story that on one occasion he walked up the street where they were and found syringes. People were dropping people off at the door of the church who'd overdosed. So he collected, and the word is 19 syringes, took them to the Premier, Neville Wran, and put them on his desk and said, "Mr. Premier, we've got a problem." And they did something about it. So that's how the chapel got involved in people working on the street. After that, the Reverend Graham Long came along. He was the Church of Christ minister, like myself, and was there from 2004 to recently, 2017, and did amazing things. And he's an amazing man, one of the great communicators that I've ever heard. And now they have a young guy called John Owen, and he puts out a newsletter every week. I read it. To be honest, I've been known to pinch material from John, because he's talking about real people doing real things in the context of looking for faith and survival. Well, John wrote something last week that caught my complete attention. I've rung him and asked him, can I use it? And I'm going to call this little homily today, I'm going to call it, I'm going to call it Thin Places, because we have too many thick places. Most living, says John, is thick, where we stumble from place to place, meeting to meeting, with the assurance that very little real meeting is going on. Time moves in a chronological order, in a methodological way, and sometimes, in some days, the end can't come soon enough. Celtic mystics spoke of alternative realities. They called them thin places. These are spaces and times where the veil between our world and the eternal is particularly thin. Time slows down, and all present find themselves sharing what can only be described as sacred ground and bear witness to something almost otherworldly and magical. Most of us have experienced and been lucky to be experiencing this only a few times in our life. He goes on to tell a story about how he and some friends gathered with what they call Grandpa Graham Long, for Graham's 70th birthday. And they're having a nice time and they're having a bit of fun and relaxation. And then this party was put on by a couple who'd lost a daughter. Graham, the pastor, had buried that lovely young girl, and Graham himself had been through the tragedy with his wife Robin of losing a son. So there they were. It was like the honest and openness of the pain that experienced brought them together looking for help and healing. But it wasn't like they were looking. It just happened. And somebody picked up the guitar, somebody told some stories, and all of a sudden it was like nothing else existed. That's what young John calls a thin place. It's the place that God provides for us. We don't seek it. It comes out of the grace and love of his heart. I'm going to talk a bit more about that in a minute.
You are never far away, mountain high or darkest day, deep in doubt or filled with faith, you walk with us along the way.
This is where you meet with us. And this is a thin place. This is a thin place. This is a thin place.
I'm taking a piece from the pastor at the Wayside Chapel's, John Owen, about thin places, as opposed to living thick and careless and casual. Thin is something very special. And I'm making the point as I go that this isn't something we can do ourselves. It's very much a God factor. In fact, other people have called the thin place, we can call it serendipity, we can call it sacred ground, we can call it coincidence, although one of my friends in AA, I'm not in AA, he is, but I might be if I keep going, he makes the point that he calls coincidence God's way of staying anonymous. And this is a bit sort of flaky, ethereal sort of stuff, and it's a bit unusual for me, those of you who know me, but it's important. One of the great minds of the 20th century, and a person who's influenced my life more than practically anybody else, is C.S. Lewis. He wrote The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. He wrote Mere Christianity and the Narnia series and Aslan as Christ and the like. And he's making this point about trying to hang on to things and think we can own it and make it happen. He said it's simply no good trying to keep any thrill. That's the worst thing you can do. Let the thrill go. Let it die away. Go on through that period of death into quieter interest and happiness that follow, and you will find that you are living in a world of new thrills all the time. But if you decide to make thrills your regular diet and try to prolong them artificially, and don't we do that, they will all get weaker and weaker and fewer, and you will become bored, a disillusioned old man for the rest of your life. It is because so few people understand this that you'll find many middle-aged men and women meandering and moaning about their lost youth at the very age when new horizons ought to be appearing and new doors opening from them all around. It is much better fun to learn to swim than to go on endlessly and hopelessly trying to get back to the feeling you had when you first went paddling as a young boy. I'm talking about Jesus, and when I talked to John, the author of that piece I read to you. I said, so what was the thin period of Jesus' life? And it's easier to say, well, Jesus was God in the flesh. He was the Messiah. He was the promised one. He must have had thin places all the time, thin experiences. Maybe. And then those who were cynical would say, because he knew everything, nothing was a surprise to him. I think there were a lot of surprises. I'm going to read about one now. It's called The Transfiguration of Jesus. It's on all the Gospels, but this is from Mark's Gospel. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John and led them up a mountain that was high, where they were alone. As they looked on, a change came over Jesus, and his clothes became shiny white, whiter than anyone in the world could wash them. I love that. Then the 3 disciples saw Elijah and Moses talking with Jesus. Now these are the heroes from the Old Testament, and they knew them in their history. Peter, of course, spoke up and said to Jesus, "Teacher, how good it is that we are here. We will make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." Peter and the others were so frightened that he did not know what to say then. Then a cloud appeared and covered them with its shadow, and a voice came from the cloud. "This is my own dear son. Listen to him." They took a quick look around, but they did not see anyone else. Only Jesus was with them, and they came down from the mountain. Jesus ordered them, "Don't tell anyone what you have seen until the Son of Man has risen from death." One of the things that struck me when I've done a little bit of research about this thin place business, which is different from the things we do, it's more about the person we are. One of the things I've noticed is that we all want to fix things, make them happen, drive them into happening, and then leave monuments around. And so here is this extraordinary experience the apostles had with Jesus. He took them as his best friends up to the mountain, had this amazing experience, almost ethereal experience. A thin place for all of them. And Peter wanted to build statues and monuments and tents. That's not what God wants us to do in our lives. When he touches our lives, he wants us to respond to that touch with commitment, faith, discipline, love and grace towards other people. You don't have to build anything to do that properly.
So this is a song by Otis Redding. Otis died just a couple of weeks after recording this song. And he recorded this song in a state of mind that was actually quite broken. And I believe he actually had one of those thin moments when he was sitting on the dock contemplating his life, all the things that had gone wrong, the people he'd tried to please, and wondering where all the fame and fortune had led him. It's a melancholic song, but I think there's a lot of deep meaning in it. My friend Sam McNally's going to help me out with this. Well, I'm sitting in the morning sun, and I'll be sitting when the evening comes. I'm watching those ships roll in, and I'll watch them roll away again. Ooh, I'm sitting on the dock of a bay, watching the tide roll away. I'm sitting on the dock of a bay, I'm just wasting my time. Well, now I left my home in Georgia, and I headed for the Frisco Bay. 'Cause I got nothing to live for, nothing's gonna come my way. So I'm just sitting on the dock of a bay. I'm watching the ships roll away. I'm sitting on the dock of a bay, and I'm wasting time thinking, well, it looks like nothing's gonna change. Yeah, everything remains the same. I can't do what 10 people tell me to do now. So I guess I remain the same. I'm sitting here and I'm resting these bones, weary bones. The weariness won't leave me alone. 10,000 miles I might roam just to make this dock my home. I'm sitting on the dock of a bay, watching the tide roll away. I'm sitting on the dock of a bay, just wasting time. Oh, oh. Play that thing, son. Thank you, Jay.
I haven't had many thin places in terms of my spiritual life, but I've had a few. I've had one recently in the last month. Something very special happened to me, that there was a hole in my life for many years, and then something happened, someone spoke to me, and that hole has been, healed, because it was a wound, I suppose. And the Bible talks to us about God being the author and finisher of our faith, the beginning of the end. And we're in the process. Sometimes it's hard. I spoke to somebody this morning who's having her just had her second breast cancer operation, and she's a woman, probably a bit younger than me. And some of you have gone through hell with this COVID thing. If not having the illness, then having to watch people who've had it, or being isolated and restricted in the things you do. When the Apostle Paul wrote to the Philippian church, and he wrote all these wonderful things to churches, and they were all individual churches, and they were going through their ups and downs, and so what he wrote to them was quite different from one place to another. But one of the wonderful verses I like is when he says, "Don't be anxious about anything, but in all your prayers, ask God for what you need, always asking with a thankful heart." And I find that we need to move out of being sort of the shopping centre, shopping list asking, to moving into the thankful thing. It changes your life. I was lucky enough to work at the Crystal Cathedral with Dr. Robert Schuller, and one of his associates was Dr. Ortiz, and he was a South American guy. And I remember this sermon where he talked about most of our prayers are the junk mail of heaven. And he went on to explain that sometimes we just say, "Oh, well, I want this, I want that, I'm shopping, I want this." And very rarely, and even in terms of using other people, very rarely do we stop and give thanks. And when we give thanks, it seems to me we make room for things to happen in our lives. I was lucky enough to be the minister at Tilapia Church of Christ for about 11 years, I don't know, in the 70s, I suppose. There was a guy who used to come with his family. His name was Joe. And they were very active in the church. His wife was involved in everything that was going, the women's groups, the children's groups, the boys' brigade and the like. But Joe used to be there on Sunday, but he never owned up to or acknowledged to being a believer or a Christian. And that was all right. It was a great church because we accepted anybody who came. And one Sunday I got home from church and there was a phone call from his wife. And she said, I just want to tell you, Jay, that my husband, Joe, took communion, took the Lord's Supper this morning. And he told me it was his first commitment to believe in Jesus Christ. Now, the guy's about 50. He'd been surrounded by people all the time who had their own faith. But for him, none of that was important. His timing was important. His relationship with God, his partnership with Christ was important. It was his thin place moment, and it changed his life. So what I'm suggesting is that we open ourselves up, let ourselves not be constrained and constricted by the woulds, shoulds, oughts, gonna, gotta, sorts of language we use, but to recognise that God's Son Jesus came to show us what life is about and cared enough for us to give his life for ours. And in the church at Wollongong this morning, and if you're watching this on Saturday night, you can come in the morning, we're having the Lord's Supper and communion. And it's a way of us saying to God, thank you for loving us. And it's a way of God saying to us, hey, not only do I love you, but I call you to serve and to love other people. May God bless you. May his peace fill your life. And may you make room for the little spaces that you have in your